It's fair to say Ted is one of the most famous canoe builders of all time. It's not a huge niche, but it's a passionate one, and he looms large within it. My name's Matt Snell, and I worked for Joan, Barrett, and Ted Moores at Bear Mountain Boats for several years, dealing with the online side of their business. I was just a computer guy, but very quickly I realized I'd stumbled into something exceptional. It wasn't just that Ted and Joan were inspiring, kind people, although they are. It was the deep respect from a community they'd helped build over the course of decades. And I always loved looking back at their archival photos and seeing how it all got started. In the summer of 1972, a young Ted Moores, then living in Toronto, spied a wooden canoe by the side of the road, thought he could make a better one. He set up a workshop in Muskoka on the hunch this could be the way to earn a peaceful living in the country. He called his fledgling company Sundance Canoes. Ted had no woodworking skills or money, so the building method he developed at Sundance had to be simple and easy to accomplish with basic tools. The Sundance canoes were light, strong, and easy to maintain, but the resin system available at the time was not compatible with wood. Ted eventually sold the company and moved further north to a hilltop property in the northwest corner of Algonquin Park. Sundance was his first encounter with the realities of the canoe building trade and the beginning of an education in the history of the craft.
Prior to 1860, canoes in North America were crafted using materials at hand, like wood, bark, or skin. Then for a period of about 100 years, canoes were built in factories. What we did was develop and teach a simple system that anyone could use to build a canoe, putting canoe building back into the hands of the maker. This technique has contributed to the survival of the wooden canoe, and it's the reason for the survival of Bear Mountain Canoe.
The earliest canoes were made by indigenous peoples, primarily to get around, move a village, cross a lake, bring home a moose, transport furs. In the early 1800s, European settlers arrived in Canada, bringing their wooden boat building skills and tools. With the population of Canada booming, there became a greater need for transportation and recreation, and as a result, canoe manufacturing factories came into being in the 1860s. Many creative attempts were made to keep the water out of wooden hulls. Wide-board canoes with planks sealed using several types of battens, cedar strip, even a very successful attempt to use canvas between two layers of wood. The key to manufacturing was to make the process repeatable by adapting the indigenous dugout as a solid building mold. Revered companies like Brown, Strickland, Peterborough, English, Dean, and Chestnut became famous throughout the world.
When we met Kirk Whipper in the early 1970s, he kindly shared his entire collection of canoe-related research with us. Kirk had assembled the largest collection of canoes in the world, which eventually became the Canadian Canoe Museum. For the first time, Ted was exposed to the big picture of the canoe in Canadian culture, and he made an important discovery, which should have influenced our decision to throw ourselves into a lifetime of building and restoring wooden canoes and boats. By 1960, most of the wooden canoe building companies had gone bankrupt. The cedar canvas technique, however, survived the longest because they were quick to build. The materials were inexpensive and easy to source.
With the introduction of cheaper materials like aluminum after the Second World War, the early builders couldn't compete. To revive the craft, a new approach would be necessary. And in the late 70s, a creative partnership found just the right method. Not long after Ted met Joan, they started thinking about ways of earning a living, working together, making things, and living lightly on the land. Growing up, neither had experience with canoeing, but who isn't attracted to a shiny cedar canoe?
In an isolated corner northwest of Algonquin, Ted and I lived in a log cabin without electricity or telephone, hauling water from a spring. We had no money, so we worked with what we had, felling logs in the woods for lumber and gathering stones to build a house and stone workshop. We named our company Bear Mountain Canoe Company.
The two events that made the difference from the Sundance experience were innovations in wood and epoxy resin developed by Michigan boat builders Jan and Meade Goujon. When issues of Wooden Boat magazine started to arrive from across the border in Maine, Ted knew he was not alone or crazy. The revival of wooden boat building had begun.
We developed a new and simple wooden boat building method, but also had the determination to keep trying despite setbacks and to believe in the value of preserving and advancing the craft.
When you picture a wooden canoe, you might be picturing a cedar strip canoe. Ted's innovation was to explore core composite construction, which means the wood acts as a core or spacer sandwiched between layers of fiberglass and resin. With this idea, wooden canoe building techniques moved into the next generation, a visual representation of a cedar strip canoe without the disadvantages. But after several years, Ted and Joan experienced the same constraints that early wooden canoe builders did. Building canoes was too labor-intensive to be sustainable as a business.
As a company, Bear Mountain's strength was fading fast. But rather than giving up, we turned what some might call failure into an opportunity.
The answer was to look to aspiring home builders who wanted a beautiful canoe and didn't have to count the hours spent building. Ted and Joan began to develop and sell the know-how to let makers build their own canoe. They developed canoe kits with all the parts machined and ready to assemble, and included 5 pages of simple instructions created on a typewriter. These 5 pages became the foundation for Canoecraft, a book co-written with friend and fellow Back to the Lander Marilyn Simons. More than 40 years later and in constant print, Canoecraft is distributed worldwide with over 400,000 copies sold. Writing books turned into Ted's night job as he went on to write Canoecraft, photographed by his daughter Jennifer, and Kayaks You Can Build with author, builder, and teacher Greg Rossell. He also contributed a chapter to The Canoe in which he traces the evolution of wooden canoe building methods during the heyday of wooden canoe building in Canada.
You know, we threw it out there and people were astonished that we did, and they thought, well, you're killing your business now because you're sharing your secrets. But in fact, sharing that information has been the best thing that we ever did. It's been what has sustained us, and we've managed to eke out an existence by providing parts to people who want to build their own, by providing some knowledge, selling them a DVD, having them come to one of our classes. But it's been such an amazing legacy.
The new products and educational materials stabilized the business, a collaboration with designer Steve Killing, who developed a formula that would accurately express stability, made it possible to develop professional building plans. Steve has been involved in all the Bear Mountain building projects. Joan took over marketing and sales and continued to look for ways to promote the building method. Bear Mountain was a hit with woodworkers and canoeists, but a little help from some high-profile makers eventually brought them to a wider audience. Jimmy DiResta and actor/woodworker Nick Offerman agreed to record the Canoecraft companion video after a chance phone call, and it's introduced Ted's method to an audience that might never have even considered boat building.
When Ted and his partner Joan asked me if I'd be interested in shooting this project, I said, yes, I'd be very interested, but isn't this type of thing usually done by some sort of expert? Joan said, yes, usually it is, but in this case, we want this project to be a visual aid by which the viewer can see that using our system, any idiot can build a really nice canoe. And with that in mind, we think you'd be perfect. About 8 months ago, I got the idea to build a canoe because I had some time to kill in New York City. So I called a company called Bear Mountain Boats in Canada, Peterborough to be exact, and asked them to send me some plans. They gave me all the wooden pieces and the epoxy and the fiberglass cloth, and I put it together according to Ted's book. I finished about 45 minutes ago, and we're going to put it in the water.
To keep cash flowing and support his family, Ted pursued his education. learning more about wooden boat construction while he restored and repaired the vintage runabouts that found their way into the workshop. The restoration work was physically challenging, but the results were breathtaking and showcased Ted's high standard of work as well as his ability to take on just about anything. For many years, Ted took his toolbox on the road, sometimes for pay, other times as a volunteer. He taught classes from Canada's Arctic to Central America. His travels even led to an unlikely collaboration in Belize, where his influence is still felt.
Yeah, I'm Chris Gaidis, live in Belize, Barrett Boom. Yeah, I do a little bit of trucking, and I do canoe building on the side, so that's what I do. Me and Ted become good friend. Ted here that I start building cedar strip boat, so he come over and find me, and he saw me building a cedar strip boat right here. So he look around in my shop, and he don't see any tools. So he say, "How you build this boat?" Tell him with just what you see. So Ted look on my boat and he say, "Oh, this is a great work without proper tools." So he say, "I'll get you some tools." So Ted pack some tools for me and send it back, and that makes a difference.
Many, many years ago, Belize, which used to be British Honduras, had no roads, and people accessed the interior of the country by the Belize Old River. Then the roads came in about the 1940s, and people stopped using the rivers only to fish and wash in. So tourist outfitters in this small country thought a canoe race would reintroduce people to the water and the importance of this resource to their country. And each lodge could have a canoe, and they would have a race once a year. Well, someone found us on the internet and asked us to come and show them how to build a canoe. It was the owner of a lodge who had a really active, talented group of young woodworkers available in the local community, and he thought it would be a really good skill for those people to learn how to build a canoe, but also it would increase their employment opportunities as well if they had woodworking skills. We packed up and went to Belize for a few weeks and built a canoe for the race, which was called La Ruta Maya.
It's the time of the year when we all get together. It's the time of the year when we all get together. It's the Ruta Maya heading to Belize City. It's the Ruta Maya.
People don't necessarily talk a whole bunch about who made the boats or how the boats came to be, what they are. It's always normally about the paddler. But behind the scenes, I mean, I know perfectly well the impact it's had, certainly in our lives as individuals here, but also probably equally and more importantly with the lives of the guys up at the wood shop. And that can only be attributed to the teacher.
Because the boat that we built here was the first boat that they were introducing to the river here. It was made out of wood. And those time it was mostly Kevlars were the ones on top. But now I am seeing that they are introducing more wooden canoe to the race. It's not much Kevlars and carbon fiber. And what is good also because people will try to build their own canoe and go to the race. And what is good for Belize also.
Outside of the building method, if you ask Ted the most significant contribution he's made throughout his long career, he'll point to his sprint racing canoes. These canoes are used in flatwater competitions by sprint canoe racing clubs throughout Canada in a sport dating back to the 1860s. Paddling a C-15, a 30-foot canoe paddled by 15 people, is an important rite of passage for sprint canoe clubs today, and many paddlers take that drive all the way to the Olympics. When approached by the Canada Summer Games to supply C4 racing canoes, Joan and Ted were alerted to a new adventure and connected to the network of Canadian clubs.
Hi, I'm Mark Oldershaw, a sprint canoeist, three-time Olympian and Olympic medalist in the sport. I've been around the sport my whole life, grew up paddling at the canoe club. I've 85 national championship gold medals now, and a whole bunch of them are in Bear Mountain C4s and war canoes. And it's just a boat that we love to paddle in. War canoe races are 500 meters or 1,000 meters. They're the most exciting races at nationals. We have a lot of races there. It's 5 days long, but whenever there's a war canoe race, everyone comes down to the shore and is cheering, and it gets everyone excited. And the cool thing is too that you look across the line and every boat is exactly the same, and Ted has made all of them, and it's pretty an incredible thing to just think that one person has made pretty much every C-15 in Canada.
One of the things that I guess really attracts me to any boat is that the design comes from what that boat does. So it isn't an idea somebody thought of. It's saying, how can I build a boat that does what I want to do? And a canoe is unique in that the nature of it has to be adaptable to a whole bunch of things. It's got to be light enough to carry. It's got to be seaworthy enough to get you across the lake in a blow. It's got to be big enough to carry your moose home. So, there's big demands on it. Ultimately, it's beautiful because that design is driven by meeting that objective. In terms of canoe building, I think what I look for isn't so much building style, it's more the integrity that went into each piece. So you can have a boat that's built very crudely by our standards, in this shop, be just as beautiful as what comes out of here, because it's based on what the person had to work with and giving each step the best they could give it. And that's the integrity of it.
First of all, let me say that I've always had a huge amount of admiration for people who can do wonderful things with their hands, whether we're talking about Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, or Ted Moores. I mean, Ted, to me, and Joan, Bear Mountain, they are artists. They are the artists of the canoe.
After years of working on other people's boats, in 2007, Ted decided to build a family boat he called Sparks, an electric hybrid fantail launch. It's reminiscent of the 1880s steam yachts and built as a demonstration that the simple building method could be scaled up for larger hulls while minimizing the impact on the environment. Or as Ted puts it, a test to see if he learned anything during a lifetime spent building and restoring boats. The building method Ted developed is no longer new, but between his expertise and innovative design ideas and Joan's skill in connecting with people, they've stayed close to the heart of the canoe building world. Every week, messages, letters, and visitors appear from around the world who are eager to swap photos and stories. A high school in Lindsay, Ontario, has built over 100 boats, introducing the craft to a new generation. An engineer in South Korea has introduced canoe building and Canadian-style racing and paddling to countless novices in his country. Hundreds of copies of Ted's book are sitting on shelves around the world, waiting for the right moment to realize a dream. 50 years ago, Joan and Ted chose to follow their dreams of a life of purpose over profit and to inspire and support other people's dreams. Dedicated, stubborn, generous, driven by imagination and skill, a love of the past, and a faith in the future, they've made the world a brighter place for lovers of one of the world's most iconic watercraft.
I didn't know what my heart was in for till you stepped into the room. And I didn't show, but I wanted to know everything I could about you. dreams were made to be believed in. So I put every single dream in you. But you set the bar so high above the sky, and you nailed it too.